Hey guys, welcome to a new video. I was watching the live streams during the last events in Pozo and Fuerteventura, and even though I've been critical of the decision to combine fin and foil into one discipline before, I have to say that I really enjoyed watching this high wind racing action on the PWA scene again. But one thing that made it so exciting for the foil racing was for sure that you never knew if someone was going to finish the race, even if they were in first place, because there was just so many crashes, especially on the foil. Luckily, no one got seriously hurt, and I think that's also because now it is mandatory in PWA racing to wear a helmet and an impact vest, and I think that already reduces greatly the risk of injuries. But watching all this racing, the question still remained in my mind, is foil racing actually more dangerous than fin racing? So let's take a look and see if it is or if it is not. So one thing that differs between foil and fin windsurfing is that for foil racing, for sure a lot of concentration and reaction time is needed, much more so than just brute strength like it was in fin racing. Because you have to constantly adjust the height of the foil by the tiniest movements, and you have to ride actually the foil really high so that you get the best speed, because the more of the mast that is inside the water while racing the foil, the slower you will be. So you're trying to ride the foil as high as you can without letting the foil spin out of the water, because as soon as the foil is coming completely out of the water, you lose all lift and you make a big crash, which I've done a lot of times before. And I thought one thing that was especially interesting to me, when I was watching the live stream, I saw, for example, Maciek Rutkowski. He was warming up by juggling balls and catching balls just to get his reaction up. And that just shows how important that is for foil racing. But I think the biggest difference of foil racing nowadays compared to what fin racing was like are the jibes. With a foil, you enter the jibe with a fixed radius, which you cannot really change, because as soon as you enter the jibe and put down your radius, it is very difficult to change the course. And I think this is where a lot of the danger comes from. Because say someone crashes the jibe in front of you and you're with the foil behind and are on this fixed radius, it's very hard to avoid them, because you need a longer time to adjust your course on the foil in the jibe compared to the fin. Luckily on the foil, so on the mast and on the wings of the foil, only the trailing edge is very sharp. The front edge of the wings and the mast is not super sharp, it's rather blunt. So there isn't really that big of a risk of cutting someone when you crash into them. But at these speeds these guys are doing on the PWA scene of up to, I think, 38 knots in the race or something like that, this heavy foil with a blunt edge can be very dangerous even if it's not a sharp edge. But then again, serious incidents also occurred before when it was only fin racing, especially here on Fuerteventura. Like I think a couple of years back, there were a lot of serious accidents during one of the races in the PWA Worldcup on Fuerteventura. But that being said, I think another risk comes from mixing foils and fins together into one discipline. And like if you're skiing or snowboarding, I can compare it to that, because the two have very different movement patterns and react very differently. So they naturally don't fit together so well. Like with a foil, you have more options on the reach to change your course to more upwind, more downwind compared to the fin. And then what I said in the jibe with the radius being so fixed, while with the fin you can just put the rail of the board into the water and make a very tight jibe or make a wide jibe. These two naturally, I think, don't mix together so well. And yeah, especially in the jibe again, I think the fins already have the disadvantage. So they really have to push and go in the tiniest gaps in the jibes to get ahead, because they already have the disadvantage of having very low acceleration out of the jibe compared to the foil. And I think with the fin windsurfers having to squeeze into these tiny little gaps while the foilers cannot really adjust their course during the jibe so well, this is just a recipe for disaster in my opinion. And unfortunately, I believe at some point some accidents can happen because of just that reason. Anyway, I'm not trying to put down the foil racing at all. As I've said before, I found it super exciting and exhilarating to watch the racing here in Fuerteventura and also in Pozo in these high wind slalom destinations. And I think a lot of people tuning into the live streams felt the same way, as there were a lot of positive comments about how exciting the racing was to watch. But the questions about the danger is just one that came to my mind, as I personally also had a lot more incidents, not really accidents, but incidents on the foil, especially when learning. I tore a couple of tendons and I just crash a lot more on the foil. So I think naturally foil windsurfing does have a higher risk than fin windsurfing. Like for me, going 30 knots on a foil, or now my top speed is up to 32.8, is much more scary, and I'm much more likely to crash compared to when I was in Lüderitz and was doing almost 50 knots. It felt much more stable to be doing that in Lüderitz on the fin compared to doing over 30 knots on the foil. So I just made this quick video to talk about it and maybe create a little bit of a discussion how injuries can be prevented in the future before something serious happens. And I also think that everyone in the PWA is aware of the risks in foiling, and that's also why they made it mandatory to wear a helmet and an impact vest during racing, which I think is a very good step. Like we even see some guys like Michel wearing this neck protection thing so that if you crash that your neck will not get hurt. And yeah, I think these things can be a step in the right direction. But in my opinion, just this risk is another factor why fin and foil should not be mixed. But I also realized that it's not as easy as just saying that, because there's a lot of different factors involved in making that decision. Like, for example, what the sponsors want, because like on the foil, you can guarantee a result much more easily compared to on the fin, just because you need less wind. And also, will there be enough riders to compete in both disciplines? So the decision is not so easy to just say, yeah, okay, let's separate it. There's a lot of factors involved, and I realized that. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you guys think about the topic. So leave a comment down below so we can start a discussion. And as always, thanks to my sponsors and my Patreons for supporting this channel. And yeah, see you in the next one, guys. Ciao.